The growing consciousness of the white supremacist agenda and its adverse effects on the perceived value of Black lives is reshaping society as we know it. But the fear of many Blacks around the world is whether or not this movement will last.
The ideology of white supremacy is basically that whenever white people and non-white people coexist, like white people should dominate. And then also the idea that white people have a superior culture and also are superior genetically.
Don't want people to have the understanding that something about the way that things have been playing out is broken or a mistake or accidental. It's actually very, very intentional. And you can see it in terms of local, state, and the federal government has been crafting this sort of racialized oppression, again, for hundreds of years. So we don't want to talk about broken systems. We want to talk about oppressive systems that are intentionally oppressing people and are functioning according to the oppressive, violent mandate that they have in order to allow the white ruling class to maintain power, continue to hoard resources, that type of thing.
To give some background on why white supremacy exists today, you'd first have to understand the history of European settlement in West Africa and how the initial connection between Black and white people was made with such inequity. Europeans first came to West Africa as explorers. While slavery had existed for thousands of years around the world, this new brand of racist slavery was designed by a small group of Portuguese elites. According to historian Ibram Kendi, the first account of racism as we know it today was found in a book entitled The Chronicle of the Discovery and Conquest of Guinea, released in 1453. It was written by Gomez de Zurara. Not only was it the first European book about Africa, in the book he lumped everyone in the continent together and described them as beasts without any custom of reasonable beings. De Zurara wrote, "They had no understanding of good, but only knew how to live in a bestial sloth." When you look a little deeper, you'll find that De Zurara was commissioned by King Alfonso V of Portugal to write this book. It was a biography on the king's uncle, Prince Henry, the Navigator. Prince Henry is credited for opening the age of exploration, which lasted for 200 years, from the 15th to 17th century. This era is signified by European exploration of the world, which led to the European discovery of the Americas, and from the European perspective is credited as the beginning of globalization. Prince Henry only went on 2 explorations himself, but he established the first school of navigation in 1418 and invited map makers, scientists, and navigators to teach. They would train the sailors on how to use compasses and other navigating instruments. He also sponsored new types of ships for exploring. When the school was established, no European had sailed past Cape Bayador of West Sahara. It was perceived as the edge of the world, so Prince Henry sponsored ships to sail past that point. In 1434, Captain Gale Innes succeeded, and in 1444 through 1446, Prince Henry sponsored 44 ships to explore the west coast of Africa. While in many history books Prince Henry is celebrated as a pioneer, they often leave out a key component to his ingenuity, and that was the establishment of the transatlantic slave trade and the makings of white supremacy. His ships often brought enslaved Africans to Portugal to trade. Gomez de Zurara served as a chronicler and loyal commander in Prince Henry's military order of Christ. And in the biography, Gomez documented Prince Henry's first major slave auction in Lagos, Portugal, in 1444. Some captives were white enough, fair to look upon, and well proportioned, while others were like mulattoes or as black as ethos and so ugly. Despite Africa's diversity in languages, ethnic groups, and even complexions, de Zurara blended them into one single group of people which he deemed worthy of enslavement. It is suggested that Desidera's book was written as a tool of propaganda to justify the use and maltreatment of African slaves by the people of Portugal. This very notion of the beginnings of white supremacy reveals that it was founded on capitalism and has now become the most powerful marketing tool ever created, powerful enough to shape an Orwellian world that has rendered the black global majority subservient to the dominance of a white minority that would in actuality cease to function without labor from blacks.
I think racism was basically invented to support the exploitation of labor and resources from non-white people. You mentioned an example from Portugal, but in the US context, the very foundation of this country is a racialized capitalism that says white people will be the power structure at the top, and non-white people have to be the labor class that supports their powers.
What white supremacy has done, and it's infected the whole world, including here in Nigeria, without even having to have a white man standing next to us. We are still here. You see people bleaching their skin. You see people believing that, you know, when a white person is attached to a project, it has more value. So there's this like idea that the more proximity to whiteness that there is, the, you know, higher its value.
Yeah.
I guess, and then the conversation is about like, how do we as a society unlearn that? What are some like actionable steps in your view that would help us unlearn and start to redirect kind of like our own value systems, or create our own value systems as black people or as non-black people?
I mean, to be honest, capitalism isn't going away. And like you said, like even in majority black countries, like capitalism has been used as a tool of white supremacy, and it's still proliferating without white people. So clearly it's here to stay. So yeah, to answer your question, I think that we do have to think of like really innovative ways to unlearn. I think that definitely begins with our education system.
White supremacy was a man-made invention, so if it can be created, it can be destroyed, and the tools to destroy it are concealed in the shadows of black history and heritage, a history the white lens has fought to extinguish. White supremacy was not solely crafted by white people, so what part do our forefathers have in shaping this dogmatic ideology? In school, I never received an education in black history, especially not Nigerian history. This education came in adulthood after graduating from university. I started out on my own as a documentary filmmaker. Had I not chosen this career path, I might never have stumbled upon my own history. I was never taught Nigerian history in school. Part of it was because I left Nigeria at the age of 6 and started schooling in the UK, and all of my education has been in British and American schools. But even my peers that remained in Nigeria were not educated in Nigerian history. It was banned from schools in 1994 and made an elective. I did have a brief stint where they taught us, I think it was Black History Month in high school in America, and they taught us about the Jim Crow laws. And a friend of mine, and this was just before we got to that chapter, and a friend of mine who was white, she asked me something about the Jim Crow laws, and I was like, what is that? And she was shocked. She was like, how don't you know that? But I guess because I only started going to school in America at age 16. Yeah, I was around 16 at the time, and so I had no education about American history whatsoever. They don't teach that in the UK. They don't teach that in Nigeria in schools. It was very interesting, but at the time I could tell you, I could write essays about the Holocaust. I could write essays about the British Industrial Revolution. I could write essays, about different European stories, Henry VIII, all of that. I could tell you so much about all of that, but I could not tell you about Nigerian history. I couldn't, because they didn't teach me that in school. So even in Nigeria, a country governed solely by Nigerians, our history and heritage are often hidden from us, not just by white colonial influences, but even by our own people. This goes to show the depths of white supremacy and the fact that white people aren't its only architects. History is primarily told through the white lens, and modern day's questionable account about the transatlantic slave trade is a testament to this. When most think of slavery, they picture American plantations and less often Caribbean ones. Images portrayed in American history books, Hollywood, and American media in general of suffering and impoverished blacks. But the story of slavery did not start in the West. It ended there. The true start was elsewhere. I decided to go to the source of the slave trade. After all, there can be no trade without goods, and those goods were people, African people, my people. I had to go to the source of those people to find answers. So I went to Badagry Slave Port, one of the largest slave ports of the transatlantic slave trade, which exported 24% of all slaves to the Americas. Hi.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm Kenim O.
I meet with Temtope Mobi, the curator of the museum, and the great-great-grandson of Chief Sumba Mobi, a revolutionary who fought to end the slave trade in Badagry.
Here in Africa, even before the arrival of the white people in the 14th century, slavery has been on. But our people were not being maltreated the way the white people maltreated our people. Before they started meeting our people to sell slaves to them, they have been coming to capture slaves. They have been coming, stay around for like 50 years, capture people, and they set fire on the roof of the building, and people rush out in the night, they capture them and sold them out. By the time they now decided that these people are trying to fight them, they now came and negotiate with them. And so they told our forefathers, oh, we are taking your people down to our country to give them a better life. In the year 1502, a slave market was established here in Badagry called Vlekete Slave Market. We practice transatlantic slave trade here in Badagry. In Calabar, they practice transatlantic slave trade also. While in the northern part of the country, they practice trans-Sahara slave trade. Slaves were not being captured here in Badagry. They were brought from the hinterland. So any slave gotten from the western part of the country, for example, were brought to Badagry. While any slave gotten from the eastern part of the country were taken to Calabar. These are the real chain used on our forefathers during the period of slave trade. This is called the neck lock. And this a slave will carry around his or her neck, walking inside the farm every day for 18 hours. While traveling, this will be around their neck for 3 to 4 months before they get to their final destination. You can feel the weight of the chain and feel what our forefather went through in the hands of the white people. Now, depending on how long the chain is, a chain can have up to like 50 neck lock. That means that chain will connect 50 people. Like 20 neck lock, connecting like 20 people at a time. They are going to arrange them on a single file. I think it weighs about 40 to 50 kg. And this is what a slave will carry around his or her neck, walking inside the farm every day for 18 hours. While traveling, the neck lock will be around their neck for 3 to 4 months on the Atlantic Ocean. We have 2 categories of slaves. Not here, over there. America, Brazil, Jamaica, Cuba. We have domestic slaves. We have plantation slaves, or you call them field slaves. Domestic slaves work in the house. The domestic slaves will be at home with the children. For the domestic slave, the male domestic slave, not to have sexual intercourse with the children or wife of the white people, what's the reason why they usually castrate them? And also, for them to carry heavy objects, or whenever they are going to the war front, the domestic slaves will be at the war front, in front, fighting. You know, by the time they castrate somebody, goat or animal, they become big, huge, and tall, like a giant. So they have more strength to walk. While the plantation slaves, on the other hand, work in the farm. Now, the plantation slaves, most of the time, they usually pierce their mouth. They perforate their mouth. We have an instrument there called the mouth clip. Whenever they are going to the farm in the morning, they put the mouth clip on their mouth and padlock their mouth. Slaves are not allowed to talk or eat while working on the field because white people are afraid that when these people talk to one another, they can revolt. For them not to be able to talk, because the white people are afraid that when these people talk to one another, they can revolt. Or for them not to eat while working on the field. Those working in the sugarcane plantation can decide to eat on sugarcane. And these white people needed this thing to be transformed to sugar. So they usually pierce their mouths. Whenever they are going to the farm in the morning, they padlock their mouths for them not to eat or talk. They will be the one to plant, water, nurture. At the end of the day, will not eat out of what they have labored for. Any child given birth by a slave is a slave. These babies were not allowed to move closer to their parents while working on the field because they don't want them to distract them or step on what they have planted. So they usually gather the children together. They chain their wrists with this, make them sit down under a tree far away from where their parents are. We have the torture weapon. They usually force into their wrist. Even as tiny as my hand is, it could not get in. Now that torture weapon will not get to their wrist easily. They will need to break their bone for the torture weapon to get to their wrist. After forcing this to the ribs, they make the slave climb a platform. After which they screw this up to a tall tree, remove the platform. The slave will now be suspended on the tree from morning till night. Most of the time, whenever they want to punish slaves, they punish in the farm, so as to serve as a deterrent to other slaves. In the course of doing this, most of the slaves die, and these people still don't care. This is called the branding iron. The branding iron is also what they use in piercing the lips of the slaves. Some parts of Africa still practice that up till date. And whenever a slave tries to run away, that branding iron, they'll put it in fire. When it is red hot, they will put the leg of the slave on a falling tree and eat that weapon into their leg to pierce their foot. In case they were unable to get that slave alive, they have dogs. They have trained to run after such slaves and cut off the throats. They call them then killer dog. And so these people prefer a slave to die than for that slave to escape.
You have, white people who have been the oppressors, who have been the violent people, but they have somehow managed to figure out a way to brand their victims as the aggressors, or as the people that execute the things that they do themselves. So I'll give you an example with black men. They position black men as though they're dangerous when white men are the ones that are actually dangerous. Or black women, they position black women in media like these sex objects when white men are the ones that have been raping them.
Yeah.
Or using them for sex. So can we just speak about that sort of like interesting reverse kind of psychology that they've played into?
Yeah, I think white supremacy as a system always defend itself. It will always find a way to rationalize its harm, its violence. It will always find a way to cover up its own just aggression and like violence and hatred.
All right, what was going on?
It was a forgery report.
Yep.
And he was just not compliant with getting out of the car.
Okay.
We were trying to get him in the back of the squad.
Okay.
And he was just basically resisting.
Yep.
He wasn't showing us his hands at first. Then we were trying to get him in the squad. He kicked his way out. He was kicking on there. And we came out the other side, and he was fighting us, and we were just basically restraining him until you guys got here. Step out of the vehicle and step away from me, all right? Step out and face away. Step out and face away.
Okay, please don't shoot me. Please, man.
I'm not going to shoot you. Step out and face away.
I'm looking you out of eye, man. Please don't shoot me, man.
I'm not shooting you, man.
Please, man. I just lost my mom, man.
A lot of these police departments that have been exposed for disproportionate killing unarmed Black people, they do internal investigations, investigate themselves. So how do you get anywhere when you don't have any outside evaluation of your institutional practices? The same people who, kill unarmed Black people are the same folks analyzing the data and interpreting it and talking to the media. So when it's all said and done, and the courts and the judges. So when it's all said and done, they control the perception of the police department in America.
This was the money we spent in Africa in those days, cowries. Yoruba people call this aje. I don't know what you will call this. So this was a means of exchange during that period. But here in Africa, the white people don't recognize this as money. And that was the reason why they introduced trade by barter. When the white people came and showed our forefathers mirror, dry gin, cannon gun, and so on, box of matches, people started giving out their slaves to the white people. And so Badagry then was a slave corridor. A bottle of dry gin during the period of slave trade was in exchange of 10 human beings. A mirror was in exchange of 10 human beings during the period of slave trade. I don't know if you see the umbrella at the Barracoon. That umbrella was in exchange of 40 human beings. And this cannon gun was in exchange of 40 slaves. Now, the cannon gun outside, one of it was in exchange of 100 human beings. A boat that can carry 1,000 slaves, they will carry 1,500 slaves because they get more slaves here. By the time they get to the middle of the water, they will release some into the water to die. And in the course of traveling, many of them die. Now, because these people exchanged our forefather for a bottle of dry gin, they can always come back for more slaves.
At one point, you will finish drinking the gin and it's finished.
Okay.
And you have lost
10 slaves.
Of 10 slaves.
10 slaves.
Does that not, at least on a generational level, does that not teach the son, or even the man himself, does that not teach him, okay, let me not sell slaves?
Okay.
What is the benefit of
selling
short-term gain?
Okay, gin.
For short-term gain, what's the benefits? Why would it continue for 400 years?
They started telling our people, we can give you this to fight that community. So they started giving out cannon gun. That why don't you go in the night, attack the community with this cannon gun? By the time you kill the strong people in the community, every other person in that community becomes your slaves. So lastly, I'm going to show you the slave drinking water bowl. 50 slaves are meant to drink water from that bowl at a time. And they will need to drink with their hand being tied to the back. They bend down to lip water like dog. If you look at the edge of the pot, it's very rough and sharp. So in the course of drinking, they get caught by the edge of the pot and their blood drips into the water. They will still need to drink the blood water like that because they have access to food and water once in a day. You are welcome to Badagry.
Temitope Mobi took me to Seriki Farami Williams Abbas Court, a barracoon with 40 slave cells, the only slave barracoons left standing. Seriki Williams Abbas was a former slave turned slave merchant in the 1800s. The other slave barracoons were destroyed by colonial masters, possibly an attempt to clear this brutal history from their names. But Seriki's influence in Badagry won him the leverage to keep his standing. Today, Seriki's offspring inhabit the barracoons, and they have rented out some rooms to a few tenants. I met his great-great-grandson, Jafar Williams Abbas.
His own birth name was Ifare Milekun. The man was captured as a slave in a town called Jogarile in Ogun State. And then once the slave is being captured, they are no longer to be bearing their own name, while they were bearing their master's name. So the first person that bought him is Abbas. Abbas came from Idaume. Idaume today is in Benin Republic. He took him down there, he used him as a domestic slave. And later on, Abbas sold him to a white man called Williams. It was the Williams that took the man down to Brazil.
In Brazil, Williams gave him an education, and over an undocumented amount of years, Ifar Malekum won his freedom, under one condition. He was to work for Williams as a slave merchant. Williams then built him a kingdom, where we stand today.
When this man came to Badagry, he was given a title called Seriki. Seriki means head of Muslims. So that's why the man is wearing Seriki Williams Abbas. His own birth name disappeared from the name. This place we are now is called a waiting cell. The inner room is the cell. So 40 people are kept in this inner room before the arrival of the ship.
So they just, everyone, they stuff them in here.
So, and there is a door here before. Room. Yeah. So they will lock up the door once the 40 people are in this room. And this is where the wee and this is where the poo-poo. You can imagine.
These are all like women. They will put all the women in here.
The women are separated from the men. So.
And they pushed all for how many people? I don't know. Can 40 people fit in here?
Yeah, 40 people are kept in this inner room, and all the chefs here then they are not here then.
So this room, wow, yeah. And this is a tiny.
And there is only ventilation they have in the room. That's why most of the slaves die, because of the heat and the odor.
So who treated them like this? Was it Nigerians or was it the Westerners?
The Westerners and the Nigerians.
Seriki was like a king. He was a liaison between Williams and the Nigerian merchants. All goods passed through him, which won him power and prestige amongst his kin. And with his commission, naturally, he became a wealthy man. All these years he was making money, at least he was getting commission from these slaves, right? So was he a wealthy man, and how much of that wealth did he pass on to his children and so forth, down to your generation?
He's a wealthy man because the man has a lot of property. Talking in this Badagry, including the Lagos Island and the Ogun State, the three places I'm talking about, he has a lot of properties.
So you guys have inherited that
Yes.
property. How many of you are there now?
Unlike now, Seriki has 128 wives and also have 144 children. You can see it's a big family.
So that's just him.
That's just him.
So you guys might be a million people now. No, maybe not a million.
Yeah, we are close to that because it's a big family.
Men are sort of socialized to like just hustle for external validation. You know, the title of the job, the salary, the size of your house, the brand of your car, what polo shirt you're wearing, what shoes you're wearing, Jordan, like, you know, all these material things. I feel like so many Black men get wrapped up in that selfishly, because it really goes back to this inferiority complex of like, I feel like I'm not enough, but if I get this and this and this and this and this and this and this, maybe I'll convince myself I'm enough, and maybe white people will be convinced that I'm enough. But as we know, like that, you can't convince a white person who is, you know, convinced Black people are inferior, that you're human just because you have on Jordans or just because you have on a diamond chain. Toxic masculinity is just this idea that the way that patriarchy socializes men is to almost be like a soldier versus like a human being. You know, you're not allowed to really feel any emotions besides anger, or, you know, to express any type of affection for anybody besides like lust for women, or, you know, objectifying women. But a lot of men in the mental health field, for example, men have the highest rates of suicide and are more likely to kill themselves.
There's a court where Seriki passes judgment on the community, and that's the chamber over there where he relaxes himself after the court processing.
So what kind of meetings are taking place in here?
Like maybe anybody that have issue within the community, they will bring the matters before him, and he will settle everything for them.
When he was the one that was enslaving people, why were they still looking to him?
Because he's like a king. I told you he's like a king in Baragri then.
I couldn't wrap my head around Seriki's betrayal of his own people. After suffering at the hands of his master Williams, why wouldn't he make a change when he was given the opportunity to finally come back home and given a position of power?
Seriki was a slave, and Seriki returned back to Badagry on the condition that he will be helping them to get slave.
But he's back in his own homeland, or at least in his home continent.
Accepted.
He can change his mind when he gets here. Why does he have to follow?
He will have signed the contract with them that I'm coming to Badagry to help you get more people. You know, most of the time the white people are always on the field looking for slaves.
But okay, my real question is: are we here to just blame the white man for everything? What is our part? Because we're still robbing our brothers and sisters today in Nigeria.
To some extent. I think to some extent, our forefather needs to be blamed.
I think a lot of Black men don't realize that they struggle under white supremacy just as much because of the racial terrorism and the pressure to be white and assimilate. That's a pressure in and of itself, but also the pressure of like manning up. That I think that more than anything prevents a lot of Black men from like healing and sort of like evolving and transcending race. White supremacy is not just about racial superiority, it's also it's also been orchestrated or carried out through like patriarchal violence, through like white men militarizing their countries and, you know, going to war with other countries, colonizing other countries, pillaging other civilizations. So we've internalized this notion that, okay, white society is led by white men and white patriarchs. So in order to compete with them, we got to create a Black society that is also patriarchal and led by Black men. And Black men have to be at the front. Black men have to be at the center of everything. But we have to stop competing with white men and white society and the structure of their society and really focus on bringing all of us in.
But would you say, when it
Mhm.
comes to patriarchy, wouldn't you say that actually before, that has existed far longer than white supremacy? That just came from the idea that, or the fact that men were physically stronger and in a time where strength was a value, which it's not right now in the information era, but in a time before the information era, where strength was of more value, that is where men could physically dominate women. So is it really something that is white supremacy, like they're mimicking white supremacy, or is it just something that like that is just how humanity has been built based on survival of the fittest?
I think it's both. I think it existed globally prior to any country being colonized by white societies. But it just so happens that because Europe created, you know, guns and weapons first, you know, their white patriarchy trumped a lot of other societies' patriarchy.
Are you proud of his legacy?
Yes, of course, in some aspects. But the role he partake in the slavery, I always felt so bad. Whenever I'm saying the history or thinking about the history, because, and the man has no choice because he's working under his master and he has no choice rather than to do whatever his master asks him to do. Even though if you were born then, there's nothing anybody can do.
That was just the way things were.
Yeah, the way things are then.
The Saraki family wrote a letter to the public apologizing for Ifar Maleku's contribution to the slave trade. My mother is from Abo Kingdom in Delta and my father is from Owa. They are adjacent neighborhoods now. Really, they're the same place and they share the same culture and language. But due to tribalism, they are divided by leadership. Tribalism is one of the most detrimental tools used to sever Black unity. It is very prominent in Nigeria today in our economy, our government structure, and so on. But it was also a tool that the colonizers used to manipulate us into selling ourselves. When it comes to the relationship between Africans and Blacks of the West, I think we need to understand each other's history and culture. I think that Africans, some being the descendants of slave traders, and Blacks in the West, some being the descendants of slaves, can learn a lot from one another. Our severed ties and lack of communication not only enables the perpetuation of white supremacy, but it traps us in an ignorant state of self-hate and what I like to call transatlantic tribalistic conflict.
Slaves don't bear name during the period of slave trade. They bear the name of their master. I'm so sorry. Here in Nigeria, Lagos precisely, we have some Yoruba's family with English name, like Smith, Cole, Coca, Darosha, Da Silva, and so on and so forth. Now, a Yoruba person, your name will tell somebody where you come from. If you call yourself Ade something, they know you are from a royal family. There are some names you call yourself, they will tell you your state. But when you tell somebody you are Williams, where do they know you come from? How will a Yoruba man be Williams? Whenever these people come to Africa to buy slaves, the slave will do away with his name. So by the time they come to Badagry to buy slaves, for them to be able to identify their slave, they will need to write their name on the body of the slaves. And they do that, they use this instrument to do that. They put this in fire. When this is red hot, they will now use this to write their name on the body of the slaves. And this is what we have adopted as fashion today. We call it tattoo.
In Nigeria, names are important. Personally, I believe people become their names. My name is Kenim O. It was given to me by my grandfather and his ancestors, which can be traced back thousands of years. Oba means king, Obaibena means a king does not fight. My first name, Kenim, means my God has done well for me. So to sum it up, my name means God has done well for me, I am royalty, so I do not fight. My name gives me strength. When you call me, you call out my destiny and I answer to it. When you are grounded in your identity and your heritage, no one can ever take that away from you. And what we Africans need to understand is that this type of grounding was stripped away from descendants of slaves because of the actions of our forefathers.
This is called the ankle lock, and this is usually used on the leg of two slaves at a time. Sorry? Two slaves, you have to have this, their leg padlock, and then we need to move with this around their ankle at the same time. Now with this, it's not going to be possible for the slave to run away.
When the ships arrived, the slaves were made to cross the lagoon on a canoe, which they rowed themselves, while wearing many kilos of chains on their necks, ankles, wrists, and waist. They were all linked. If even one of them fell out of the canoe into the lagoon, they would all sink to the bottom.
Every slave had to be on a single file, facing the same direction. Don't forget about the chain, which have to be around their necks, the ankle lock, the wrist lock, and also the waist chain.
Once they got to land, they would walk another 15 minutes to the point of no return. But on their way there, they would stop at the spirit attenuation well.
The water from the well is the last water the slave would drink before going to the ship.
When they get to this place, they have to drink the water before they go on board. So also to give them more strength, or to give them more power, so that they will be able to survive down to where they are going to. So whenever they get on board, they always revolt, they always fight their masters. So the Europeans now brought back the report that we will not help your people again. We will not make them to become a lawyer, we will not make them to become an engineer. So we will not be coming anymore. So all because our people don't even know what is really happening to them over there, because they call it journey to unknown destination and they can never return. So assuming these people are coming back, they will have brought back that report that, okay, well, these people are suffering us over there. This African ship now came together like, okay, what can we do to make these people to stay? Now they now brought the idea of shamming this water, like to mix it with some kind of spiritual stuffs like voodoo, to put inside the water and give to the slave, but the slave don't really know what is inside the water.
And for the slave not to fight the white people while on board was the reason why they usually sham the water. They put African concoction inside the water by juju. So by the time the slave drink from the water and make the recitation, they become less aggressive and lost their memory.
So this juju, does it affect the slave for life?
It will only work on them for 3 months. But somebody that will lose his or her memory for 3 months may not be able to recover everything. Now, the people we call Black Americans today could not return back to Africa because their forefathers were unable to tell them, this is where I came from. So by the time they run their DNA tests, they tell them, oh, you have 97% Nigerian blood in you. They only trace their roots back to Badagry. Any slave gotten from Badagry are always less aggressive. And the reason is because of the spirit attenuation well we have here in Badagry. By the time they force them to drink from the water and make recitation, they become less aggressive. And that was why the white people are coming to Badagry, because they know that any slave they get from Badagry or Nigeria are always less aggressive. So we need to blame our forefathers. The white people don't know how to put sham inside the water. Our forefather did that.
Here we have the Ark of Departure, and we also have the slave tunnel. The Ark of Departure is a place which they have to separate the slaves. Like I mentioned before, like they have in a family, they have to separate the son from the father, then the daughter from the mother. they have to be in a separate position in the ship. So now after separating them, every slave have to move through the slave tunnel. They go around the tunnel, then they go out through the back exit, then they have to go inside a small paddle boat. They have to be taking like 10 or 15 slaves at a time. Now the big ship have to be at the middle of the sea, which is offshore. Now they have to be moving like that, using a ladder to move them from the small boat down to the big boat. But if you happen to be that the small boat capsized, that means the whole slave have gone. Now the white people always try to protect themselves.
So because when they're on the boat, they're still wearing the chains, so they will fall in and they're done.
They're gone. So, and I think that is the reason why they make their value to be more higher. Now just imagine a cannon gun, which they have to take like 100 slaves for a big cannon gun or a small one for 40, or one umbrella for 40 people. So they believe even if 5 people or 10 people can survive out of the slaves, they are not at lost.
Yeah, because I don't think if somebody dies, it's just to get another gin bottle.
Exactly.
To bring.
Exactly. Right. So if you have 100 slaves on board, so if 20 can survive or 30 can survive, they are still okay with it. So that was, I think that was the reason why they don't really value the life of our people.
It's depressing, man. It's depressing. Very sad.
Yeah, very, very sad.
There is a division between Africans and Black Americans. I first learned about it when I was around 15 and I visited a family friend in Harvard. Now, this was, at the time I had lived in the UK, I was living in the UK, and I was being educated in British history and culture, and I was completely oblivious to American society, and my only understanding of Blackness was through the British-Nigerian lens. We did a Harvard tour and we learned that majority of Black students who were accepted into Harvard were of African descent. Black Americans were unhappy about this because we Africans took their spot in schools due to the quota system in American universities. Without any understanding of their perspective, I immediately took offense. I even believed the critical tropes that Africans would say about African Americans, saying that they were lazy and no good or whatever. And this lie resonated with me for years. Years later, I attended Tufts University. This is where I realized that the division was fueled by hostility and resentment towards Africans. I was a member of the African Student Organization and we hosted a debate, Africans versus Black Americans versus Caribbeans. The tension in the room was palpable. We were all friends and very well acquainted, but it was an opportunity for us to communicate about our differences. It shone a light on the ugly stereotypes crafted by white supremacy. You know, insults were flying around the room. Africans smell, Africans have beady beads in their hair and all that. And us Africans replied with the typical stereotypes about African Americans. That day, I looked at my African American peers differently, with an aura of superiority and self-pride. But I was also very ignorant. I had not received an education in Black history or not even Nigerian history, to be honest. All I knew was that Nigerian society told me that I was superior to them, and American society told them that they were superior to me. Today, I think it's so sad that I unknowingly fell into that trap, and not only was I willful, I was proud. And even more sad is the fact that there are many people that still think the same way today. This hostility, this transatlantic tribalistic conflict is what built white supremacy in the first place.
Respectability politics is traditionally how Black people have been able to navigate white society, just, censoring ourselves, mimicking white mannerisms, white patterns of speech, white hairstyles, etc. So I don't want to say as if it's I don't want to make it seem as if it's completely a choice or if it's just willful ignorance in and of itself. It's something that we've had to do. It's something that's been forced upon us. But what I'm critiquing specifically is the way that we enforce that amongst ourselves.
It's not accidental in my mind that there is this divide, because I think it's a tool of white supremacy to try to separate Black people into these different bunches. I mean, white people basically took the continent of Africa and drew some arbitrary lines and borders that had nothing to do with people, language, culture, anything. They've been doing this for a really long time. In the Black American context during slavery, you know, the separation was between the dark field Negroes who were out doing the work and the light-skinned house Negroes inside and trying to drive home that separation. So it's a tool of white supremacy to create these divides and to reinforce them. And I think one way that's really happened has been through the media. So the images that you get in America about Africa are, again, of just, you know, the kids with the loincloth and the huts and everything like that. To make people think about Africa as a place that you don't want to be associated with, that you don't want to visit, that you don't have any ties to.
There have been other groups throughout history that have been, you know, they have endured atrocities in the name of white supremacy. So like, I'm thinking about the Holocaust, Native American genocide. However, white supremacy is literally built on anti-Blackness. So personally, in my opinion, I don't think any other group has sort of internalized the dehumanization of white supremacy more than Black people. And I think that manifests most evidently to me in the way that we sometimes like treat each other, and the way that we sometimes devalue each other in the same way that broader white society has taught us to.
It's important to shine a light on white supremacy, dissecting it so we can learn how to combat it. In that process, the revelations tell some painful truths. White people aren't its only architects. Tribalism has played a key role in the devaluing of Black lives, and tribalism is the direct result of Africa's ethnic, linguistic, and cultural diversity. This diversity has been described as the first point in the Five Gates theory, a theory coined by a researcher at Home Team History. Gates open and close, and these 5 gates opened, which led to the downfall of the rich continent of Africa. According to the theory, the African continent met its demise because of 5 reasons: African diversity, desertification, globally desired natural resources, human error, and religion. But we are going to focus on how African diversity contributed to white supremacy. Africa has nearly all the resources humans need to thrive and survive, and historically, African wealth was unmatched. This is exemplified in Africa's ability to build great civilizations in the ancient world, which led to affluent empires like ancient Egypt, the Mandinka, and so on. The wealth of Mali King Mansa Musa, the richest person to ever walk the planet, is another example. Africa became distinguished in the world because of its legendary wealth, which led the Arabs to say, against the camel's minge, use tar, and against poverty, take a trip to the Sudan. These vast natural resources made the continent a #1 target. Arab and European writers spoke frequently about the wealth of Africa, which contributed to their desire to plunder it. But it wasn't only natural resources from Africa's soil that they sought.
We exported our human capital.
Okay.
And this is probably one of the reasons why we didn't develop our own country. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, because if you look at Nigeria of today, our people were still being taken there. Most time they come here, promise us white collar job, especially the ladies, and they take them there and use them as prostitute. And you know, because of the situation of the country presently, many of us believe that getting there you are going to be more successful, and I don't see it to be true. It's a big lie. By the time our people get there, they make them wash a dead body, sweep the streets, and do all those dirty jobs. The same thing happened during the period of slave trade. They take our people there. You know, then there was something like all these big farm mechanisms. So, and they believe we are strong. So they usually take our people down there to work for them in the farm. The same thing happened today. What the white people cannot do now, they take our people down there to work. And that's why you see many people rushing, oh, I want to travel to America, I want to travel to this. At the end of the day, to my own point of view, I think the white people, they don't want Nigeria to develop because of their selfish interests.
Africa's ruling class played a pivotal role in the continent's demise, and this historic system is still present today, especially in Nigeria.
They were saying it in Lagos State House of Assembly that they want to demolish all the tourism sites in Badagry. That they want to remove colonization from the story of Lagos State. Now, if we remove colonization from the story of Lagos State, what will our children, what will they hear about the wickedness the white people has done to our forefathers? By the time they demolish the first story building, pack all the chains away, what will the next generation see and say about these white people? As at the time Chief Sumu Mobi died, they have not given birth to my father. But my father see the chain and passed the story to me. I will as well pass to my children. But by the time they take this thing away, what are we going to have here in Badagry? That means they want to kill Badagry generally. Badagry today has been neglected despite the effort of our forefather. If you are coming to Badagry by road, from Lagos to this place, from let me say from the airport to this place now, you spend like 4 or 5 hours, where you are supposed to spend like 30 minutes. The road that leads to Badagry is nothing to write home about. So people that want to come to Badagry today will either come by water or by air, and that is expensive. So most people come by water. Now, Badagry, we believe we have the first primary school in Nigeria. But there is nothing like industry. The only industry we have in Badagry today is the Okada people. That's those bike men carrying people from one place to the other. We don't have any industry. We don't have any institution. We have nothing to show apart from the tourism sector.
That's the whole industry.
How many people are into tourism?
In Nigeria?
Are people aware that slave trade really took part in Badagry? Nigeria accounted for 24% of the total numbers of slaves that were taken out of Africa. Ghana only have 14%. But when you go out there, you hear more about Ghana.
To Ghana,
yes,
I went to that castle.
Okay, Amina Castle, yes.
Fortress.
Yes.
Still standing today. We would have had a castle. Where is ours?
We don't have.
But we had it back then.
We have it back then. In fact, we have a tunnel at the point of no return. But it has collapsed. The government is not taking care of it. If not that, the Anglican church are taking care of the first story building, it will not be there as we talk now. If not that the Seriki family are maintaining the Barakun, it will have been demolished.
So why is there, can you just speak about the maintenance issue?
The government of Nigeria are not seeing tourism as a good industry that can fetch the country money.
Nigeria's ruling class's relationship with the West has always been on financial terms. In the slave trade, we plundered our natural resources, that being human capital, for gin bottles and umbrellas. Today, we plunder our natural resources, oil and other minerals, for luxury designer bags, cars, and properties in the West and Middle East, further developing their nations while stunting ours. The irony is, because of this, Nigeria is incapable of effective manufacturing and therefore still imports those basic goods like gin, umbrellas, and mirrors. Same story nearly 600 years later. Africa's ruling class is just as culpable as whites in building and sustaining the system of white supremacy.
What contribution do you think Black people have to spreading beyond, I understand, yes, we need everybody to participate, but before we even can get to people participating, what steps can Black people do now to ensure that our history, our stories, our culture is learned around the world?
I think it starts with the self and just learning on a personal level before trying to reach anybody else or be a spokesperson or representative for Black people. And so that looks like rethinking the way that we parent, rethinking the way we approach our careers, the way we approach giving back to our communities, the way we approach mental health, the way we approach, including everyone when we say Black Lives Matter, including the experiences of Black queer people, Black trans people, Black people with disabilities, Black incarcerated people, literally meaning everybody.
Right.
So I think most of us, even the most well-intentioned, have a lot of respectability politics to unlearn before we get to a point where I would trust us to be at the table, be at tables of power, and really, I guess, push changes that make a transformational impact. I wouldn't expect anything more than just the status quo.
Black Lives Matter represents the first time that we might have real change, because we're seeing a generation of people that are truly united. But that change can never take hold until a vital and fundamental step is taken, which is the resolution between Blacks of the West and Blacks in Africa. That can only happen when a restructuring of understanding occurs. That comes from education. We all need an education in Black history. Africans must be accountable for the actions of our forefathers. Descendants of slaves need to be willing to access Africa and learn what Africa truly is, on terms that haven't been predetermined or engineered by white people. This is the only way they can receive the richness of their heritage and benefit from it.
What are the next steps that you think that we can make to reconnect African Americans and Africans?
I think if you have the means, go. If you don't have the means, read the books. There's a ton of history on, the shared struggles in terms of slavery, colonialism. There's a lot of really good history there. And I think that would help people dispel the rumors that and the misinformation that white people and the lies that white people have been telling.
Yeah, let's just talk about what steps that we can make, how we can change global views on Blackness.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's a huge task. It's a huge task, and it's something that is just a simple choice. I think it requires a lot of unlearning, unlearning patriarchy, capitalism, unlearning, stigma about mental health. So it looks a lot of different ways, but I think at the crux of the issue is really forcing ourselves to have uncomfortable conversations and not sweeping things under the rug for the sake of appearing respectable to white society. And I think that is one of the most damaging byproduct of white supremacy, is that it's taught us to sort of shrink ourselves, to censor ourselves, not only in how we present ourselves to white people, but also what we acknowledge amongst ourselves and what we stigmatize amongst ourselves.
How can we set our own standards and build our own standards as Black people?
We have to strike a balance between navigating the white world and affirming ourselves. And I feel like a lot of people get sidetracked or lost in that journey. So we have to on our way to the table, to getting a seat at the table, we can play the game, sure, but we also can't forget to lift as we climb, to reach back and help people and affirm the rest of the people who are from where we're from.